Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So it's quite a long one, this one, mainly because of the clips. I've got some Sky News that I've been collecting. Two of them about Gaza, and one of them is about I think it's going to be in Parliament soon to be talked about again, the right to terminate your life if you have a certain medical condition, or if you have medical conditions that mean that you're not going to be able to survive. Can't remember the technical term, it's gone out of my head at the moment, but it's a lady who took her husband to Digitas, I think it's in Switzerland, and she's being investigated for her part in that because it's assisted suicide, which is the problem. So on the first one you're going to hear is about Gaza, and that is just to do with the bodies that are being left in the rubble, and all they have is like sledgehammers to try and break blocks of concrete. And of course, if you know, when we see these emergency crews from around the world rush into areas of when a natural disaster has taken place, and they're sending all that stuff, and still it takes a lot to get those people out. And to imagine that now, for the last 18 months, that people have been slowly dying in being crushed or starving to death in little bits with their phones. Of course, didn't have that back in the past. Now people have their phones to be able to talk and die. Maybe these phones will all be found eventually one day, and then all that footage will be broadcast to show how brutal we are as human beings. And this is not, like I always say, this just happens to be happening between two sets of people, the Israelis and Palestinians. But this is just an example of humanity, or lack of it. Because this happens, it's not, this is not exclusive to those two sets of people. This has happened many times throughout our history and will continue to happen, and it's just in this age we're allowed to document it because we're all journalists, we all have phones, and the media is interested in showing the whole picture of around the world, and the West just idly sits on by while it goes on, and we all cling to this system that is failing us all the time, as I've talked about many times in Pursuit of Truth. But just imagine your loved ones, and you're standing outside, you manage to survive, whether you're Hamas affiliated or not. I'm not trying to, I'm against terrorism, I'm against killing, I'm against Hamas, I'm against all those things. But just imagine that you survived and your family's inside who are not anything to do with Hamas. Children, maybe the father or the mother is to do with Hamas, but the children aren't. And the problem is, of course, everyone looks like a terrorist in the sense that everyone could be a terrorist because they're not soldiers, they don't wear uniform. And so it's easy for, like we're seeing, people just to get targeted just because, I think that one. And this is very reminiscent of things, when I'm saying it is very reminiscent of how not we per se, humanity acted in the past of, you're a witch and therefore I'm going to burn you at the stake. Or put you in the water and see if you drown or float. we haven't lost that in us. We're still that barbaric animal, as it were. I don't want to put down animals, but is it an animalist? Well, no, because I don't think it is, because I don't think it is innate in us as human beings. I mean, maybe all things are possible, but I don't know, when we're babies, we don't have it. But anyway, this is getting off the point of what I'm trying to say, but just what I'm trying to say is, imagine you are standing outside your family, you're nothing to do with Hamas. Yeah, you're just an ordinary family. You just want peace. You're fed up of Israel and Palestine fighting each other for a bit of land. You just want to live there and enjoy your life. And you're never going to be able to do that anyway, because this conflict is always going to cause you to be poor and unable to get work and unable to have stability and unable to have a proper education and because of those things, keep regurgitating the same problem over and over and over and over again until we obliterate each other. This is the picture of humanity. This is Easter Sunday. Imagine what God's seeing. If God exists and he's watching us, imagine, especially those that clothe themselves in religion and bathe in his, everything I do is for you. You kill my creation. You bicker between each other. You don't share. I gave you everything freely. I'm just paraphrasing what God could say. I gave you everything freely, and you put price tags on it and made yourself suffer. How stupid you are. I don't know why we don't all understand that. That should be like, everyone should just wake up to that point and realise that. But I don't understand, we're so brainwashed in our system that we don't see that. Especially those who, majority who claim to be of religious persuasion and believe that God created everything for us, especially this place, for us, in his image, giving that majesty and profits from him coming to show us the light, show us the way. Unbelievable, really. So yes, that's the first one, is about imagine how it is. You're standing outside your family, you can hear them crying for days until they stop crying. They stop making any noise, and then they're dying or dead. Imagine that, and you can't get to their bodies to bury them because there's no equipment coming in. And then the next one is about the right to choose assisted suicide. And this was this came actually on the day of the 17th of April when it was a year since my mum passed away. But just thinking about that, the idea of I get it from both sides, that I understand if I was in that situation, I don't know what I would do, because I'm of religious persuasion and, want to be buried or we've all been told that if, suicide is a path to hell, and obviously if you don't die, as it were, naturally, that's questionable. And I don't know if that is actually in religious texts and how that stands scrutiny, and whether we should worry about the texts, because I believe in God. I don't know whether the texts are from God or from man. That's my worry. But we may put these shackles like we do with money and the division of humanity and land on ourselves, like we do these rules. But I don't know. I see the kindness of, if someone has a disease that there is no cure, because we can't be bothered to find these cures because we're too interested in patenting things and not sharing information between each other and working on things just so we can make money out of them. That's how we are. Then I get it why someone would want to not suffer. They don't want to suffer in a care home for years, slowly fading away. So I get why they would want to do that. But then, of course, I also get the understanding of the vulnerability of having that kind of system where it starts off well-intended, but like everything, it gets watered down, and then eventually anyone's allowed to go onto it. And despite everyone saying, no, it'll never get to that, they show examples of Canada, and then I think there was another country, I can't remember which one it was, but especially when there's money involved. And especially when, the argument that was given from the other side is that palliative care is so poor. And because of that, because of the suffering that we see from poor palliative care, that may be the reason why people choose to go down that route. When if palliative care was improved, you see, this may be where the argument of is this more good for government than for us, because it allows them to keep not doing well on palliative care, and as Ebenezer Scrooge would say, reduce the population. So I get it. Definitely palliative care needs improving, and that's the problem. That's the problem, isn't it? That if you know that the care is so rubbish because you know you're going to suffer, because it is a difficult thing, and most, so it's the choice because of that that's causing you to go to that route. But I suppose the other side of is mental illness and stuff like that, where people are feeling like depressed or anxious or are pushed by their family members or don't want their family members to suffer them dying, or are nervous of letting other people wash them or something and then think, oh, I'd rather die than is dead. But they might have how many years left to live of a good life, because knowing that time before you lose capacity, because that's the important thing. If you lose that capacity, you can't make that decision. So that's the problem of getting close enough to that. So yeah, I do see that this is going to be abused, like everything is. Yeah. So that's the argument of that one, and then the last one is Alex Crawford's investigation into the killing of Palestinian Red Crescent. I think it's 15 ambulance workers, and the burial of their vehicles in sand and their bodies with evidence on a phone. I mean, it does seem unusually, like if you were going to cover up something, you'd think they'd take all the phones. That seems strange that they didn't think about that, but maybe they just thought quickly, or maybe they thought no one was ever going to see this or believe their story of no, these were Hamas. And that's the problem, like I said before, is like you can point at anyone and say, well, I think they're Hamas, like in the days of, is it the Russia Stasi, of saying, I think this one is a communist, or this one is is for the West. Let's investigate them. And anyone could just say that. And the problem is in war, humans become the worst they possibly can be. We've all seen Vietnam, we've all seen Second World War, we've all seen things where soldiers, Iraq and Afghanistan, where soldiers, once they're given a gun, once they're in that environment, and PTSD and, actually killing someone, what that does to you, then suddenly, because you think you're doing it for valor, and it's a courageous thing, you go around shooting and raping and pillaging like in the past they did, and that still happens. That power gets to people. And then they start doing the most horrendous things. But on this case, like I say, this is just another proof of why war it shouldn't be happening, and how bad humans have got themselves into this system that allows us to think that war has some valor and that we have to squabble. Because what is this war about? It's about land. And who governs that land? My goodness. What decade, year will it be when we understand that we're all one, and that we only have one existence, and we have everything we possibly could have, and we create our own future, and we shackle our own selves. You see so many cards and t-shirts about how you can do whatever you want. It's only you that holds you against you. Wait a minute. Look at that from the point of view of humanity. That's what we're doing to each other. Anyway, here they are. And it's just horrible to see this of humanity. I don't know when I don't think we ever will. That's the unfortunate thing, because history shows that we've been like this for a long, long time, and we're still doing it. It's just now we're documenting it, and we're holding, are we holding people account to it? I'm not sure really if we really are. We're just carrying on the same way and telling ourselves off for it, and then carrying on again. And then another person does the same thing, and that cycle goes on and on. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.
Welcome back. Israeli strikes on Gaza have continued this week, including one on the Kuwaiti field hospital that killed a medic and wounded 9 other people yesterday. It's led to growing concern over the lack of aid reaching the Strip, leaving Gazans without the equipment necessary to free civilians trapped under the rubble. Our international correspondent Diana Magnay reports.
You may have grown used to the terrible images from Gaza now. The chaos just after a strike. The desperately injured, so many of them children. The death toll's relentless climb now that Israel is bombing again. But think of those you cannot see who die slowly, trapped in the rubble. Imagine the screams which grow fainter each day, the phones ringing till the battery runs down. Because the rescue kit they have here is so basic. How can a sledgehammer smash through huge slabs of concrete? These images all from the last 2 weeks in Shujaiya, east of Gaza City. A father and his daughters, 5 people are down there, they're saying, beneath what was the ceiling of their house. The rescue workers are incredibly frustrated by the inadequacy of their kit.
There is a child there, and this is the equipment we are using. It's so basic. A trowel, a rope, a hammer. This is what we're using. These things need heavy machinery.
But Israel won't let in heavy machinery like diggers or bulldozers, not during the ceasefire to clear away the rubble, and not now that the bombing has resumed. So at best they have these drills, and not much power to run them. 2 weeks ago, Salah Jundia made this desperate appeal to save 15 of his extended family trapped beneath the rubble after a strike in Shujaiya, 3 adults and 12 children. He says the last phone call from beneath the rubble came 3 days after the strike.
The line was open for 25 seconds, then it went dead. We don't know what happened. We tried to call, but there was no answer. There were men from the area who said they could hear people calling and young children crying.
So many family members gone. Some they managed to pull out and bury immediately, 15 more who they think must now be dead. Rescuers tried to get there, but said that Israeli military were in the area and it was impossible to come near. A family friend went again last week, but came under fire and was killed. The IDF say they are investigating the circumstances around the Jundia family as a result of our inquiries. In relation to the access of heavy equipment into the strip, they say they work closely with international aid organizations to enable the delivery of humanitarian activities in accordance with international law. And all the while, the evacuation orders continue, the scramble to move again, and who knows where.
Is that 2 times displacement. The situation is so dangerous and we suffering a lot.
Shujaiya, Rafah, Khan Yunis, so many people on the move, too many people left behind. Dana Magnay, Sky News.
Okay, let's check on the weather for you now.
Yeah, let's forget about that and go on to the weather.
I want to bring you more now on one of our top stories today. A woman who is under police investigation after assisting the suicide of her husband at Dignitas in Switzerland has told Sky News she has no regrets. Louise Shackleton has spoken publicly for the first time since her husband's death in December. That's as Parliament prepares to vote again on legislation to introduce assisted dying in England and Wales. She sat down with Greg Milam.
What I had to face is my husband was going to die. Motor neurone predominantly is not a nice death. The lead up to motor neurone is not a nice death. And I didn't want him to die in any way, shape or form. However, his choice to go to Dignitas, I supported. We talked at length over 2 years about this. And what he said to me on many occasions is, look at my options. Look at what my options are. I can either go there and I can die peacefully, with grace, without pain, without suffering, or I could be laid in a bed, not being able to move, not even being able to look at anything unless you move my head. He didn't have options. His options, what he wanted, nothing more but a good death.
Tell us about that final journey that you made.
We couldn't tell anyone we were going. We couldn't risk anybody knowing that we were getting on that plane, because whilst he wouldn't be stopped, I would be stopped, because I was the one that was committing the crime of assisting his suicide. And we got on the plane, and he took 4 people to get him on the plane. And he turned and looked at me, and he said, "They can't stop us now, can they, Lou?" And I said, "I don't think they can." And he relaxed. He immediately relaxed, physically relaxed, mentally relaxed. And if you haven't been there and seen something like that, you would never know. And it showed how relaxed it was because it took 2 of us to get him off the plane. It took 4 to put him on. It took 2 to get us off. And we had the most wonderful 4 days. He was laughing. He was at total peace with his decision. And it was in those 4 days that I realised that he wanted the peaceful death more than he wanted to suffer and stay with me, which was hard. But that's how resolute he was in having this peace. Yeah. I was his wife, been together 25 years. We'd known each other since we were 18. I couldn't do anything else but help him. I've seen people die, and he had a beautiful death. He fell asleep in my arms. The last thing he did was laugh, because I said to him, I can't believe you're snoring. And he laughed, and then he went to sleep. And as I laid with him, it was surreal. I had to call an Uber to take me from the Blue House back to my hotel in Zurich. And I remember as I walked out of there, as I walked out of there, there was this panic and this fear that I was leaving him. And I didn't know who I was leaving him with. But I also didn't know where I was going and what I was going to do. I couldn't get a flight back till the following day. So I went into Zurich and walked around the last walk that we'd been on, which was along Lake Zurich. But that was a horrific experience. If the law had changed in this country, I would have been with family. Family would have been with us. Family would have been with him. But as it was, that couldn't happen. So yes, it was the second worst experience of my life. The first one, him dying, and the second one was that.
What do you feel about the fact that, having gone through what you've gone through, there is the need then for the police to investigate that? How do you feel about that investigation?
I feel like I can't blame the police whatsoever for having to investigate, because the law says that they do have to investigate, and they have. I have committed a crime, which I've admitted to, of assisting him by simply pushing him onto a plane and being with him, which I don't regret for one moment. He was my husband, and I loved him.
There's obviously a lot of opposition, and you heard all that opposition,
yes.
And you hear those who campaign for various groups who are opposed to this and say there's a risk. What do you say to the opponents of a law, an assisted dying law?
I think that we need to safeguard people. I think that sometimes we need to suffer other people's choices, and when I mean suffer, I mean we have to acknowledge that whilst we're not comfortable with those, that we need to respect other people's wishes, other people's views. There are a lot of things that people do that I don't agree with. A lot of things that I do that people might not agree with. But we suffer those choices as long as they're not harming.
And you clearly still think 5 months on that was the right thing to do?
Parts of me think, for the selfish human reason that we all think, is I didn't want him to go, so we hang on to people because we don't want them to go. It's going to be a gap in our lives. It's going to cause us pain. And I still have that feeling. But I know that where he went, how he died, those 4 wonderful days that we had, was the right choice.
It's obviously very raw and emotional for you. It's a very sensitive issue for people who are not involved even. Why did you want to talk publicly about this, your experience and what you think?
I felt that my husband's journey shouldn't be in vain. We discussed this on our last day. My husband made me promise to tell his story, and he told me to fight. And the simple thing that I'm fighting for is people to have the choice. If this choice is out there, it doesn't mean you have to take the choice. It doesn't mean that you have to have an assisted death. This is about a dying person's choice to either follow their journey through with that disease or to die peacefully when they want to, on their terms, and have a good death. It's that simple.
Earlier, we heard from the Chief Executive of Care Not Killing, Dr. Gordon MacDonald, which is an alliance that opposes assisted suicide and euthanasia.
Well, obviously, these are very sad cases, and, there are lots of people who every day, face death or face the death of relatives in hospices and hospitals around the UK. And so we do need to look at how we help people have peaceful and dignified deaths. But the way to do that is by properly funding palliative care in this country at the moment. A third of palliative care funding comes from the NHS. A quarter of people with cancer don't get the palliative care they need. So that's what we need to look at, rather than legalising assisted suicide, which will just encourage abuses and coercion and people who are depressed and people who feel that they're a burden on others to end their lives inappropriately.
Proponents of the bill say, well, it's going to have legal protections and that it will be fully worked through in Parliament. Opponents, though, point to countries like Canada, and they say there has been kind of legal creep in that regard, and that increasingly the number of people that are eligible for assisted dying is getting wider and broader in scope. Are you fearful that if it is passed here in the UK, that is what potentially might happen?
Well, it's inevitable that will happen, because the principle which underpins these bills is choice and autonomy, as we heard in the clip. And, how do you have any logical restraint if that's your principle? And already we're seeing different bills being proposed in Scotland, in the Isle of Man, in Jersey, and in Westminster. So we're going to have a mess if all these bills end up on the statute book, where people will be able to move around from one place to another and have different laws applying. So it just doesn't make sense. That what we need to do is have a very clear demarcation, which is what the current law does do. People are generally not prosecuted if they're acting out of compassion, but the law is there to protect people who are vulnerable. There's lots and lots of vulnerable people, whether they be disabled or elderly, or just all of us, actually, ultimately. And we need the protection of the law against those who might choose for reasons that are not good to encourage us to end our lives. And, all of us are vulnerable at the point where we are depressed or where we have, physical illness, and we need to be encouraged and supported rather than ushered out the door for whatever reason.
There will be people that say, well, hang on a second, during treatment for illnesses, I can have choice. I don't have to agree to treatments, I don't have to agree to medications. There is a freedom of will within the treatment of that illness or ailment. But actually, towards the end, that freedom starts to get lost as the current situation stands. What's your response to an argument of that standpoint?
Well, actually, the law, as you say, does allow people to refuse treatment. That's respected in medicine. People are overly burdensome treatments are not imposed upon people, and neither they should be. But what we do need to do is help people in approaching the end to get the right palliation so that they have a peaceful death. The issue, though, with this is that not everybody has choices in life. Women often who are suffering domestic abuse, if you listen to domestic abuse campaigners, they say, that's not their daily lived experience to have that level of autonomy or choice in their lives. So how do you protect people in that situation if you bring in assisted suicide or euthanasia? It's impossible to do so. And the more people think about this sort of legislation, the more concerned they get. And that's why politicians have always in the past rejected it.
Just a reminder, if you've been affected by the story, do contact Samaritans on 116123 or email jo@samaritans.org.
Israel has refused to answer questions about exactly what happened to 15 paramedics and aid workers who were killed after their convoy was attacked by the IDF in Gaza. Now, a detailed investigation by Sky News can reveal the most comprehensive account yet of how that tragedy unfolded. Using exclusive recordings made during the attack, along with audio and satellite analysis, interviews with the survivor, family members, colleagues, doctors and forensic specialists, we have pieced together what happened. It exposes how Israeli forces opened fire on what were clearly marked emergency vehicles, that the attack continued for hours, and now exposes claims of cover-up. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford has this special report and a warning. It includes recordings of the moments immediately before one of the victims is killed.
This is the final footage, filmed by a medic in Gaza, gunned down and killed by Israeli forces on March 23rd, along with more than a dozen of his colleagues. They were on their way to help another emergency crew wounded in an earlier Israeli attack.
يعني أساس طواقمنا كانت رايحة تنقذ سيارة إسعاف هلال أحمر تم استهدافها.
The man who filmed the video was Rifat Radwan. His body was found in a shallow grave. His phone, with the footage detailing the last minutes of his life, was still in his pocket. And that footage has blown up the IDF's initial narrative about the killings. Alongside Rifat's corpse were not only 14 of his colleagues, but also the crushed wreckage of the emergency vehicles they were traveling in.
So many questions we are asking the Lebanese. Why they were wearing negligence. The lights were on.
The world wants answers. What exactly happened here, and will anyone be held accountable?
We have nothing to hide whatsoever.
Using visual evidence, audio analysis, satellite imagery, and our interviews with family members, a survivor, colleagues, doctors, and forensic specialists, we've pieced together a detailed timeline of what happened on the morning of March 23rd. From 3:52 when the first ambulance was dispatched, on to 5:08 when the attack began, and then 7:25 when the last of the communication with first responders was lost. It all builds a clearer picture of the Israeli military's targeting and burial of what was clearly marked emergency vehicles.
إنك رفعت أخواتك كلهم اطلعت عليهم واكتسب وجهي واكتسب وجههم هذا خشبتنا له وما شاء الله عليه يعني.
Rifat's parents live among the tents of Gaza, one family amongst the hundreds of thousands displaced by the war, now also grieving the loss of their son.
ولا زكي على الله أحد بس رفعت كثير انظلم هو وزملائه لأنه رايح يقدم خدمة إنسانية ما راحش لإشي.
Rifat was a paramedic with the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, or PRCS. He was part of a group of 8 Red Crescent paramedics, 6 first responders from Gaza's civil defense, and 1 UN worker, all on a rescue mission to find a missing ambulance crew that they'd lost contact with. In total, 17 people were involved. None were armed. All their families vehemently denied they were anything other than emergency volunteers. One of the first responders in the group, Asad al-Nusra, is still being held by Israeli authorities without any explanation about why, no charges leveled against him, and no access allowed to him. Munzer Abed, a Red Crescent worker, is the only other survivor. He was released from Israeli detention about 15 hours after the incident. He was in the very first ambulance to come under attack, as he and 2 colleagues were racing to the scene of a bombing in Rafah.
فكانت وظيفتي الأساسية في الكابينة في خلف السيارة. كنت أقعد يعني في الكرسي اللي ورا في سيارة الإسعاف وكنت مجهز حالي طبعا لابس الجلافز ومجهز السيارة إنها أتعامل مع إصابات. بس أنا بقدر أقول لك إنه فجريات. فصار إطلاق نار كثيف جدا بشكل مباشر علينا على السيارة. وطبعا أنا فات إطلاق النار انبطحت السيارة من الخلف. انبطحت جنب الحمالة مباشرة. وما سمعتش من زمايلي نهائيا ولا كلمة ولا أي حرف غير اللي سمعتهم الأنفاس الأخيرة زي ما بقولوا شاقة الموت.
The 2 colleagues he was with were killed, but somehow Munzer survived. He says Israeli soldiers pulled him out of the back of the ambulance, stripped him to his underwear, and held him for hours. Before being released, he witnessed soldiers digging a grave and burying the vehicles. Rifat's video is the most significant account of the morning's events. We've picked it up at 4:55, when more Red Crescent workers are dispatched to find out what's happened to Munzer's ambulance crew, which had suddenly broken off contact. We hear the conversation already getting tense.
I swear I'm feeling suffocated. Really suffocated.
After analysing the footage, Sky News has geolocated the exact route the ambulance took. We tracked the team, making its way through the dark, and see about 6 minutes into the video how they drive right past the missing vehicle they've been looking for without spotting it. We brightened the exposure to highlight the white vehicle more clearly. Markings on the van aren't clear from the footage, but we matched the shape, size, and model of the vehicle to other emergency vehicles used in Gaza. Further down the road, they meet a colleague in an oncoming emergency vehicle who tells them the ambulance crew they're looking for is behind them.
Salah, the ambulance in question is back there. Salah says, yes, ma'am, we still need more ambulances. Says another ambulance is on its way.
So they turn around and retrace their steps. On the way, they meet up with other crews, also dispatched to find their missing colleagues, and altogether the convoy continues until they reach the white emergency vehicle that's crashed on the side of the road. They stop, get out to investigate. Then at 5:08 in the morning, the shooting begins. The sound of gunfire goes on for more than 5 minutes. We can hear Rifat reciting the Shahada, a Muslim declaration of faith, often uttered in the moments before death. Also among his final words, an apology to his mother.
Forgive me. This is the path I chose to help people. Forgive me, Mum. Forgive me. I swear I only chose this path to help others. Oh Lord, forgive me.
The attack doesn't end there. Sky News also obtained an audio clip from another paramedic, Ashraf Abu Labda, who was in a different vehicle. This is the first time this audio is being broadcast. Ashraf called the dispatch centre for help at 5:13. In the audio, we can hear the shooting continue, and he appears close enough to see the Israeli troops.
Afra says there's soldiers there.
At the end of the clip, we were able to make out some Hebrew, suggesting the Israeli forces were much closer than admitted by the Israeli authorities.
That was what they said was indistinct Hebrew. I didn't hear anything.
Only after the emergence of Rifat's footage did the IDF backtrack on their initial narrative, a changing Israeli account which provided a number of mostly implausible explanations. They first claimed a drone operator had spotted the convoy as moving suspiciously, but haven't outlined why. They said the convoy wasn't using headlights or flashing emergency signals, and it had not cleared the route with the Israeli military. The video clearly shows that wasn't the case. All vehicles in the footage do have their lights on. The vehicles are marked with internationally recognized humanitarian signs, and the crews are wearing reflective gear. It seems inconceivable that anyone could not have noticed the convoy lights in the pitch dark of Gaza. A spokesperson for the IDF justified the decision to open fire by saying that the vehicles' movements were not approved in advance by the IDF. But the senior Red Crescent officials told us the area the emergency vehicles were dispatched to was outside the Red Combat Zone at the time, so their mission didn't require any military clearance or coordination. Sky News established that a new evacuation order for the area, shown in yellow here, was only issued at 8:31 a.m. This is the map provided by the IDF themselves, almost 3.5 hours after the attack on Rifat's convoy. The Israeli military has now admitted to shooting the medical workers, all of whom were unarmed, but they have yet to provide any evidence for their claim that Hamas militants were among those killed. Initially, they said 9 of the rescue workers were militants. About a week later, the IDF revised the number of militants down to 6. But again, they haven't yet provided any information about how they knew that Hamas militants had buried themselves and hidden themselves amongst the paramedics. Sky News has also investigated the social media accounts of all the paramedics involved, and none of them show any obvious affiliation with Hamas. So we asked the Israeli government directly about their claims.
Were they identified as Hamas, these 6 Hamas you've identified? Were they identified before these troops opened fire or after?
So that's why Hamas themselves use ambulances to hide their identity.
Right.
While
So
our
it was
soldiers,
after. So it was after.
No, while our soldiers stake out Hamas terror squads, Hamas hides behind civilians and then cries foul when terrorists are targeted. Mark, Israel doesn't fear the truth. That's why we are investigating this incident extremely thoroughly. Can Hamas say the same? Hamas violates every principle of international law. They hide in hospitals, in mosques, in schools, and then they blame us when war crimes blow up in their own faces.
The IDF has said that their initial investigation showed that there was no firing from close distance during the incident, but our audio analysis paints a starkly different picture. We worked with independent audio forensic experts to analyse the gunfire in the video. Using the time lag between the sound of the bullet and the gun firing, they were able to calculate that the initial gunshots were fired from approximately 50 metres away. The Israeli military has not said any of their forces came under any return fire. By the end of the recording, the analysis tells us that the gunshots were fired from as close as 12 to 18 metres, which suggests the IDF soldiers were closing in. Altogether, the shooting lasted more than 5 minutes. The audio experts confirmed to Sky News that well over 100 rounds were fired in that time. Doctors who reviewed the dead bodies after the attack told us that some individuals had more than 20 gunshot wounds, many to the upper body and head. Sky News spoke to the forensic pathologist who performed the postmortems on the bodies, and he told us about the injuries he saw.
بالنسبة للإصابات تتراوح ما بين إصابات بأعير نارية وإصابات نتيجة شظايا انفجارية. الأماكن في الرأس، العنق، الجذع أو التورسو، سواء البطن ظهر، الصدر، البطن، الظهر، وطبعا المفاصل في يعني المرافق والأكتاف.
Using satellite imagery and video analysis, we were able to recreate the scene of the attack. That's allowed us to plot the positions of each emergency vehicle when the attack began at 5:08. The vehicle that first went missing, Rifat's ambulance, and the others that came to help. Satellite imagery taken at 10:48 the same morning shows that within hours, the IDF had gathered 5 of the vehicles together on the side of the road and set up roadblocks to the north and south. At least 9 IDF vehicles are visible in the area, including what looks like tanks and bulldozers. Satellite imagery taken 2 days later, on the 25th of March at 10:36, shows that the vehicles have been buried beneath a mound of sand. This means that they must have been crushed after being moved to the side of the road. This contradicts the IDF's initial claim that the vehicles were damaged by a large engineering tool as they were moving vehicles off the road. And it corroborates what survivor Munza told us about what the military did after the attack.
فكان متبقي بواقي من سيارات الإسعاف بعجلين، لما احنا سيارات الإسعاف فاتنا طبقوهن كلهن في الكباش.
We arrived at the site where the ambulances were hit.
The IDF also refused to allow rescue teams to access the site of the attack for at least 5 days because of what they called operational activity. When the rescue teams could finally access the area, they were filmed digging mangled vehicles and dead bodies out of sand piles and placing them in white bags to be transferred to the mortuary.
They were here to save lives. Instead, they ended up in a mass grave. Their vehicles, their ambulances, UN vehicles, civil defense vehicles are crushed and dumped, covered in sand next to us. It's an absolute horror. What has happened here?
Amongst the claims Sky News heard from medics and civil defence workers has been that at least one of the bodies had their hands and feet bound together. Photos and videos obtained by Sky News appear to show the recovered bodies, their Red Crescent logo on the arm of the uniform. But there is no clear evidence of handcuffs or legs tied together. Sources at PRCS and Civil Defence told us that these white tags and ties are commonly used by emergency workers to identify bodies.
لكن ما شفناش أدوات ربط وإن كان في حالة فيها على الرسغ بعض التلونات على الرسغين في بعض التلونات قد تفيد بشغلة مثل هاي لكن مش عندي دليل دامغ على باقي الحالات بأنه في تقييد والأمر الملفت للنظر أنه أنا
In the absence of any confirmation from the IDF, it's not clear exactly which of their forces were responsible for the shootings, nor where they were based. But Sky News has uncovered significant clues. Among footage published by the IDF themselves was this photo taken at approximately 6:45 a.m. Sky News located the building to this abandoned hospital. It's just 1 kilometre east of where the vehicles were attacked. And satellite imagery from the hours after the incident shows dozens of vehicle tracks are visible between the two locations. The IDF has not released details of the soldiers or their battalion involved, but it has said they belong to the elite Golani Brigade. This video, which emerged on the 4th of April, shows a Golani patrol commander speaking to his troops.
Everyone you meet is an enemy. If you recognize a character, open fire, destroy, and move on.
We gave the Israeli military the right to reply, and they sent Sky News this response. The IDF is conducting an inquiry into the incident. The preliminary inquiry indicated that the troops opened fire due to a perceived threat following a previous encounter in the area, and that 6 of the individuals killed in the incident were identified as Hamas terrorists. All the claims raised regarding the incident will be examined in a detailed and thorough manner for a decision on how to handle the event. Serious questions are now being asked in Israel by those at the very highest levels.
The story is more complicated than the original explanation made by the IDF. The original reaction by the Israeli army, the then subsequent corrections made, all points to something very, very disturbing.
The amount of evidence already gathered is unprecedented, especially video footage that documents the events. And human rights lawyers say all this points to a grave violation of human rights and war crimes.
This looks like a dreadful war crime. The availability of a bulldozer to bury the bodies of the 15 people and their vehicles, and the change of official accounts given by Israel, all of which points to cover-up. It's exactly what you would expect of any crime. Evidence of crime, and not the reaction of innocence, but the reaction of cover-up.
These scenes have become horrifyingly familiar over the past 18 months. The killing of medics in Israeli attacks has happened repeatedly. Rifat and his colleagues are among more than 400 aid workers who've been killed here since October the 7th. Hundreds of lives violently cut short in a war that the head of the ICRC believes will haunt us for a long time. All of them should have been protected under humanitarian law. Allahu Akbar! What sets their killings apart is their last moments were recorded on video. Now the UN, the EU, their families and colleagues want accountability and justice for their deaths, and answers from Israel about why they were killed. Alex Crawford, Sky News.